Christmas time, when I was not much more than a child, that I really began my lifelong love affair with twinkling lights. Seeing the city aglow won me over. And although I admire French formality in its own way, I have to say in my kitchen, I want everything more cosy, more familiar. So although I do see tradition, say with a roast rib of beef, I borrow from tradition too with my port and Stilton gravy. It just gives it a new edge somehow. And I have to admit, okay, so my prodigious pavlova is never going to win a place in one of those beautifully symmetrical French patisserie windows. Nonetheless, I say to you, it is gorgeousness on a grand scale. Christmas and chocolate, you know they go together. And I'll grant you, my Christmas rocky road with its amaretti Brazil nuts doesn't quite have the sophistication of these French fancies. Nonetheless, pleasure-wise, it is right up there. Well, Rocky Road is a well-travelled terrain for me, and I'm talking about the confectionery bar full of crunch, goo and chew. But I've got to do my special seasonal version. Start with butter, a promising start. And next, chocolate, dark, and milk. And to help the butter and chocolate melt together, an amber swell of golden syrup. Look how beautiful. I love this. So heat on, and while everything melts together in the pan over that low heat, I can get on with some heavy-duty bashing. Now, a usual Rocky Road has digestive biscuits. This special Christmas version has amaretti, and these are so strange. They taste a bit of almond and apricot kernels. They often come wrapped in those little, almost rice paper wrappers that you can light, and they waft up to the ceiling, or so I'm told. Right. And now, bash them. You don't need to be too fanatical and pulverise all of them, however stressed you're feeling. The idea is to get rubble, flavoursome rubble, but a bit of sandy grit will help the chew factor as well. C'est fait. Now, a Rocky Road crunch bar doesn't normally have nuts in it, but you've got to have Brazils at Christmas. Something about that waxy chew that's just so familiar. Now, it might be more logical to chop these with a knife or in a machine, but this is just easier and infinitely more pleasurable. I mean, the same way I could have chopped the chocolate by the buttons. Need nothing. So again, I want some large pieces and some smaller. Variety and texture that makes this. I think everything should be just about melted together now. That is perfect. Could dive in right now, frankly. But to become the Rocky Road, you have to add everything. So first, my Christmas nuts, and the special party biscuits, in go some glacé cherries as red as Rudolph's nose. And, well, you couldn't have a Rocky Road without marshmallows. And in they go. Difficult to stir everything together, but not impossible. It may feel and look as if there's not enough chocolate to bind everything together, but there is. Oh, I love this sound of the Rocky Road. The path to temptation. Well, that's it. It probably makes your life easier if you just get a throwaway foil tray to put it all into. So clatter it down. And although I make a perfectly respectable effort to smooth everything down, the real truth is the surface will be a bit bumpy. But the point about this Christmas Rocky Road is that by the time it's had its thick blanket of icing sugar snow on top, you won't notice, you won't care. So this probably needs about an hour or two in the fridge just to set, and then it can be sliced, adorned and made festive. I like to cut the cooled slab into squares before I dust with a snowy flurry of icing sugar. I think the expression "as camp as Christmas" comes to mind. So you can see I am rather keen on Christmassiness. In fact, I like to wallow in it. I'd go for the full body immersion if I could. But the difficulty is at Christmas is that, you know, we're all busier rather than less busy, so we have less time to get everything feeling right. So I need what I think of as a rapid-fire repertoire, a sort of fast route to that feeling of festiveness and feel-goodery. And one of my seasonal standbys is my steeped fruits. Very simple. Get a jar. Into this jar you get some dried fruit. Mixed dried fruits I think are good, but any you want. And I pour over these some thick, dark, rich and sweet Pedro Jimenez sherry, though rum would be perfect as well. Just leave those for a while, not very long. And then if you need an instant pudding, frankly, some vanilla ice cream from the deep freeze and a spoonful of these steeped fruits, you're there. And I should confess that sometimes when I just need a bit of Christmas spirit, I put a spoonful into the jar and just eat it as it is. I mean, talking of which, my winter spice vodka is so fantastic for this time of year. Get some vodka, ordinary vodka, nothing special, and in it put a cinnamon stick, a dried chili pepper, some cardamom pods, cumin seed, coriander seed. And after a little time, the colour and flavours of these spices just permeate the vodka. For a Christmas Bloody Mary, I mean, nothing beats this. Now, while it's true I always have a jar or a tin of cookies or biscuits in my kitchen, at Christmas I wanted to have more of a kind of grotto feel, so that does mean my Christmas chocolate cookies. Easy as anything. Just get out a food processor and in the bowl put some soft unsalted butter, some cocoa powder, good cocoa, some caster sugar, plain flour, bicarb and baking powder, and just blitz to mix. You will have a very soft, brown, sticky mixture, but don't worry because you're not rolling anything out. You're just pinching out sort of walnut-sized pieces of this dough and rolling it in your hands, putting those balls in the oven, moderate oven, for about a quarter of an hour, and take them out. Now, when you take the biscuits out of the oven, you will see that they have a rather cracked finish, but I love that. It makes them look so homemade and comforting. And anyway, what goes on top? The Christmas glaze is a thing of deep joy. All you need now is a saucepan which you put on the hob, and into the saucepan goes icing sugar, cocoa powder, some boiling water from the kettle and a little bit of vanilla, and heat this stirring until you have a dark brown, shiny, drippy glaze. You can either pour this or spoon it or dribble it over the biscuits, and once the glaze is on, you can scatter over your Christmas sprinkles. The ones I love the most are the ones that are called nonpareils, and they are like teeny little pinprick dots, some red, some green and some white. They are gorgeous, but really you could use any that make you happy. That's fine by me.
Je vous souhaite un très agréable repas. Bon appétit à vous.
Merci. You know, a steak and chips is just a steak and chips. I mean, lovely, but it's this pat of seasoned butter that the French put on their steaks that I think makes it so special. My first had this, oh God, a lifetime ago when I was in Paris here. And I suppose it's in the back of my mind when I do my roast rib of beef with its gravy. It's not just a seasoned gravy, but really a seasonal gravy, because the two flavourings are port and Stilton, and I don't think there is anything more evocative of a true British Christmas. I don't want to stir up old animosities. And the French do a perfectly nice steak, but when it comes to beef, it has to be British. I mean, we're not called les roast beef for nothing. And I must say, I do think a proper roast rib of beef, I mean, like that, makes for a real stand up and clap feast. And that's what I want. Now, I would never normally peel onions for going in a roasting tin, but I want to use the onions, actually blitz them and blend them to make the gravy later, so it's easier to peel now than pull out charred bits of skin later. I'm not sure I am very good at cutting onions thinly, but in a way that's an advantage, because if you cut the onions thinly, they will burn too much. I mean, they'll char a bit in the tin, but that adds such deliciousness, almost barbecue deliciousness, to the gravy later. Now we're ready for the grand assemblage. I have my allium platform for the beef, and I have this magnificent rib of beef to sit on the onions. Oh, look at this beauty. The reason why the beef was out and not in the fridge is that I think it's incredibly important for meat to go into the oven at room temperature, not fridge cold. Got some garlic oil ready to seep into the beef and down onto the onions. And now my seasoning. I like meat well salted, and especially on the crust, because the beef itself will be gorgeous. And not only do I want it to have a really flavoursome, savoury coating, but all these flavours will go into the gravy. Some thyme and the heat of some cayenne pepper. And a rib of beef like this is celebratory enough, but what makes it really festive is my port and Stilton gravy. You can see how little work this involves. It just needs to go into the oven. And for a joint this size, which is just under 4 kilos, 4 ribs, in a really hot oven, I would give it 2 hours, because I like my meat very rare. Everybody needs a party piece pudding, and for me, that's a pavlova. In fact, my prodigious pavlova. And what makes my life easier is that I can get it started a day or 2 ahead. I call this prodigious because you need 8 egg whites, and these need to be whisked until you have a stiff, thick mixture that will hold its snowy shape. When you've got to that stage, slowly, gradually cautiously whisk in 500 grams of caster sugar. This is a lot of sugar, but they've got a lot of egg whites. By the time all the sugar's incorporated, the egg whites will form gleaming alpine peaks. Over this mixture, sprinkle, like fresh snowfall, 4 teaspoons of corn flour, and then add 2 teaspoons of white wine vinegar and half a teaspoon of vanilla. And it's these ingredients that give the pavlova its wonderful marshmallow consistency. I find it helps me if I draw a 25cm circle on some baking parchment, and then using the meringued whisk, I dot 4 little corners of egg white, turn the baking parchment over on a sheet, and then I'm ready to dollop on the meringue. Because I invert the pavlova base before turning it out on a serving plate later, I like to make sure the top is smooth rather than domed. This now goes into a preheated 180-degree oven and immediately turn the temperature down to 120. After an hour, turn the oven off, but leave the mega meringue in there to cool completely.
Okay, poinsettia time. So, what's in a poinsettia then?
Okay, fizzy wine as opened here, some Grand Marnier or anything orangey and sweet, and cranberry juice. So not only is it like Christmas cranberries, but also obviously poinsettia.
There you go.
Oh my goodness me. May I say, chapeau.
Cheers, everyone. Oh, Nigella, happy Christmas. Joyeux Noël over here. Oh, that's well quaffable.
I'll leave you at the helm. I want to do a bit of last-minute tinkering. Now the thing is about this beef, it's the way it's seared on the outside which is going to make it taste so gorgeous. I'm going to try and transfer it in one piece to the board because I think it's really important that meat stands, and it's that which makes all the juices go back into the centre. Right, and a slight operation is called for. I need the onions that are now lovely and almost semi-caramelised, but braised, not crispy, to go into the blender. Don't need them straight away, but it's as good a time as any. And a bit of the fatty juices to go into a saucepan. Now, there's a reason I do it like this, because I do know that most people make their gravy straight into the oven pan, but I find you just get a room full of smoke. I don't want that right now, it will ruin everything. So, into the saucepan, and I will get on with the gravy. Right, heat on. I don't like terribly floury gravies, but I want a small amount here. Just a teeny bit of flour. Whisk this into the juices from the pan. And because this is a port and Stilton gravy, the first thing that goes in is some ruby port. They're happy enough with their poinsettias. Oh, look at this fantastic Bieber pink. I'm not bothering with real stock. This is organic stock from a pot. Into the blender with the onions. That will even notice this. Right. I think it's best to turn off the heat while I whisk this in, because I don't want any lumps, and this is probably the easiest way of avoiding it. Right, I promised a port and Stilton gravy. Here is the Stilton. It'll melt very quickly. Couldn't have Christmas without Stilton. Just give a quick stir. Doesn't matter there are big blobs now because it will melt in. A little red currant jelly, always in gravies, I think. It marries very well with the port here as well, in colour as well as taste. One final touch, some of the juices that have run out of the beef while it's been standing. All important, this. And while I admit this is not the most beautiful of gravies, I feel its taste, like love, blinds you to its flaws. Okay, ready to pour. George, if I pour this out, will you take the gravy?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, that's it. Okay. Well, listen, before you clap, you have to see my very bad carving.
Fantastic. It's so Christmassy.
Well, this is the idea.
It's fabulous.
You can really taste the port in it, and that's quite odd, I think. It's in a rather spicy way. Leave them for a while. Now for the prodigious pavlova. I did manage to squeeze a bit of time when I whipped some cream, which could be slathered on top. I mean, you can do this slightly in advance, but I prefer to get the component parts done and then have a quick assembly. It's quite nice sometimes to have a moment to get a bit of breath in before I can eat any more. Right. I scooped out my passion fruit, and the lychees I just want to have torn up. And you can either peel fresh lychee or use canned. I mean, they're being torn into strips. I wouldn't give it too much thought. I've got such a soft spot for canned lychee anyway. It reminds me of my childhood. Okay, stir together, and I'm ready to anoint the creamy base. I always put passion fruit on my pabs. The lychee just make it a bit more Christmassy. And I also do a kind of winter raspberry ripple by blitzing some thawed frozen raspberries with icing sugar and drizzling it on top. Again, it's that sour touch which is so good with that marshmallow of the meringue base. I think we'll be able to squeeze this in just. After the magnificence of that beef, I need something I can be proud of now, and my prodigious pavlova is certainly that.
when the city was mine. For the company a candle would shine. From my window a sign and a prayer.
quite understand why it is that leftovers are always talked about as if they're some sort of drab, mournful thing, and I always expect people to start saying, oh well, leftovers like death and taxes will always be with us. I love leftovers, and especially at Christmas. You know, I have to say, I think I can plan whole menus just to make sure I get the leftovers I want. But the thing about leftovers too, I think, is that they can really propel you into new and different ways of cooking, which is really how my Asian beef salad came into being. At this time of year, I can really crave some cleansing heat and sharpness, which is exactly what this dressing provides. So I start off unabashedly with some brown rice vinegar and an equally generous amount of soy. It's that salty, sour tang of Asian dressings that I adore. And the interesting thing is the way they're matched with sweetness, all taste sensations met and fully satisfied. So a bit of brown sugar. Asian dressings tend to be rather lean and light, so I only want a teeny bit of vegetable oil and a few drops of sesame oil. And now the heat, not from chili, but from ginger, which is actually quite good during the cold season. Ward off a few sniffles. This is a fantastic dressing to keep in the fridge all over Christmas because it goes with everything and you can just stash a jar of it in the fridge. It's fantastic with cold turkey, just as an ordinary dressing on salads. Prawns, quite a lot here, but I like a lot. This has punch. And now a spring onion. I'm just going to snip it in. And while I adore the pungency of coriander, I also want it for the aesthetic element, because this extraordinary greenness really makes the pink roast beef zing. Right, like a Bond martini, this dressing is shaken, not stirred. Gives about the same uplift. Pour some over the salad now, keep the rest in the fridge for the next few days. And now, coriander. This is my salad of solace.